On today's World Inside, intertwined cultures of two ancient civilizations, that of the Chinese and the French, take the spotlight at the high-tech Virtually Versailles exhibit in Hangzhou. Take a closer virtual look and learn French art and history from the Palace of Versailles museum curator, Laurent Salome.
The Grand Canal. 2,000 kilometers of artificial waterway. One of the architecture and engineering wonders of ancient China. Taking an early summer walk along the canal, one can get carried away by its tranquility and elegance. Especially one is in Hangzhou, a city described by ancient Chinese poetry as heaven on earth. This summer, this piece of heaven on earth is embracing the extraordinary charm of France's Palace of Versailles in an exhibition called Virtually Versailles. I rode a bike to explore its best.
So much to see in Versailles. Riding a bicycle has always been a great experience in Beijing, in China, but now it seems that taking a bike ride in Versailles is a wonderful experience.
And I told Laurent Salome, one of those in the world today who best knows this French palace. Laurent Salome is a celebrated scholar on 17th century France. He pointed me to a corner of the Palace of Versailles.
Mr. President, what a pleasure to see you here.
Well, it's a pleasure for me and for all my team. We are very excited to discover Hangzhou.
Look at here. I mean, we are literally in the Palace of Versailles.
Mm-hmm. Virtually.
Virtually
That's
as well.
the idea. We are there, but it's only virtual.
Is there a corner of this that you like the most?
Oh, I like all parts, and we change it. If for each new project, we try to find new little things. There's a new section on Marie Antoinette, which is very elegant, I like, with a new fabric that we recreated for one of our private apartments in Versailles. That was a recent reconstruction. So, but there are lots. I also like the bicycles to ride in the gardens.
I did a little bit of that. It was a lot of good exercise, by the way. And I saw the China Anglo garden also,
yes.
Very impressive.
I like that concept of Anglo-Chinese. That's how we called them in France in the 18th century. I'm not sure what Anglo-Chinese can really mean, but that's a mixture of the English feeling of nature and gardens and a Chinese fantasy and sense of landscape. So it created that very special type of gardens that were very much in fashion in the 18th century.
That's how people of that time were thinking about one another, right?
Exactly.
It's their perceptions.
I think foreign countries and distant countries was so important for the intellectual life. I think there was a need to think of the different and the far away.
Laurent Salome is a celebrated scholar on 17th century France. He pointed me to a corner of the Palace of Versailles in which Marie Antoinette, one of the most iconic residents of the palace, showed how she welcomed the foreign culture through the Anglo-Chinese garden. This is a space dedicated to Queen Marie Antoinette, this beautiful lady. She is still today one of the most significant characters in the Palace of Versailles. One of the reasons is that she is absolutely fond of Chinese and Asian culture, and the Chinese Anglo garden has become such a popular architectural style in the Palace of Versailles since her time. The Anglo-Chinese garden is only one of the many pieces of evidence of mutual fascination between the 17th and the 18th century France and China. Porcelain is another one, a much more legendary one that is going on even today. Laurent Salome went with me to an exhibition in the same compound showcasing the art of the white Chinese porcelains known as Blanc de Chine and met his friends there. They say it's more than 3,000 years from China.
Oh, so what is it? A dragon, a snake? And it would be kaolin. It's porcelain already, or
yes,
is it a
it's
different
porcelain
stone?
already to a certain extent, but because of the ages, so it's stone-like a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, that's incredible.
And it's one of the national treasures. Can you imagine all the beautiful porcelains that started from this little one?
Of course. The original object always looks a little bit awkward, sometimes ugly, which is not the case. This is not ugly.
This is cute.
Yes, it's very cute.
Yeah.
It's probably Scottish.
Maybe China, Europe already working very hard.
It's a very good cultural exchange between Scotland and China.
Indeed. And the Europeans love Chinese porcelain?
Well, porcelain has been one of the magic connections between France and China. First, it was a kind of frustration for the French not being able to find that material, the kaolin, to make porcelain. It was a rivalry, it was an excitement, a kind of competition. And then when France was able to create their own porcelain, there was this need to do something as beautiful as the Chinese, or this admiration for the colors, for the subtle effects that you could
find.
And the details. And then the very funny thing, and that's something you see in the exhibition in Beijing at the Forbidden City, is how it goes both ways. And then you have the French imitating Chinese porcelain, and then the Chinese seeing French porcelains, which in a way are more beautiful on some details, and they use it in their own creations.
Indeed, and the emperor loves it, right?
Absolutely.
That's how the mutual inspiration comes from, right? Yeah. If they could do it, can we do it better?
Well, I hope we can do better than in the past. You know, there's a lot of discussion on this. Are we better than our predecessors? I don't know. Is the world better now? But we can hope. Well, at least we work hard to understand each other better, because for a long time it's also been a matter of competition, sometimes war. There was not such a big distance between mutual discovery and friendship, and suddenly a war. So I think now, of course, it could also be the same story, but we feel that we're in a different step of mankind, and now it's all about sharing and understanding each other, which was probably not always the priority in the past. So in that sense, yes, we're better, we're more advanced, but maybe they were able to do more efforts, and intellectually, people in the 17th century, the 18th century were so curious, so educated, and they read thousands of books, and they were so motivated. Maybe that's something which is not so easy for us today. So we have to take the best of both moments.
We are already enjoying the fruits of centuries of curiosity, but whether we will be able to take one step further, being the responsibility of our generation, I guess. But this is a fragmented world, as you know very well. Laurent, as a very well-known intellectual from your own country, I mean, how to make sure that this cultural exchange and this real people-to-people interaction can be persistent, resilient in what some describe as a fragmented world. From a president of the Palaces of Versailles and others, how would you think about that?
Well, I think places like Versailles are like important cultural treasures of each civilization can help us for that. Because if the world is fragmented, those examples of beauty, greatness, openness are so important for everyone. I can feel it in the eyes of our Chinese visitors. When they come to Versailles, I feel that they're living something very special. In a way, they feel at home. Like anybody can feel at home in Versailles. Also, they feel they're in a very exotic place. But in fact, when there's something that aspires, that attracts you, then we'll all have to travel, to move, to go, to discover things. You have to have a reason for that. If you don't see any reason to travel to a country, then that's when the disaster begins. If we don't know anything about the other countries, why are we going to travel? Why are we going to read the books? You need to have the little something that makes you want to do it.
What do you, as president of one of the most important cultural institutions, once again, trying to do now that will leave its mark for future generations? I'm sure that's a question you and your colleagues have been thinking about every day when you go doing the concert, when you are doing the exhibitions, we are trying to redesign the gardens, maintain all the best of the past. What do you think would be the best to do?
Well, it's true that when you work in a place like Versailles, you have this question in mind quite often. Not always, because all of us, we work hard, and sometimes we forget that we're supposed to leave something to our successors. But in Versailles, the history is there everywhere, and you see the marks everywhere. You see exactly what Louis XV has done, what Madame de Pompadour has done, what the gardeners have done. So, and you see if it has gone through centuries or if it has disappeared, if it went out of fashion very quickly. So you have a sense of what's important and what's not. And it makes you very modest, but also it gives you ideas to know what can be true, authentic, and sincere, and maybe that's the things that remain. And my main goal for Versailles would be to go back to its authenticity, because Versailles has changed so much through centuries. What we want now is make sure that we have the right object at the right place, the right atmosphere, not reinvent Versailles. We have to really respect the real thing, the real history. And that's when I feel okay, when we know that a room looks exactly the way it should. And we know that there has been a mistake, maybe 50 years ago it's been changed, it doesn't work. And when you have, for instance, an acquisition that makes you recreate the room perfectly, then you know it's for a long time.
That's a lot of work.
It's
right.
a difficult work, and also everything in a palace like Versailles is very expensive. When we locate a little chair that has belonged to Marie Antoinette in one of her private cabinets, you have to pay millions to get it back to Versailles because it was sold after the revolution. So everything's complicated. You have to locate things, you have to know what's the priority, you have to negotiate, and that's only one little aspect of what we do. Then we have the exhibitions, we have all those virtual, the digital projects, because if you don't do all this, the result will be that the place will disappear. It's not standing by itself. It takes a lot of work. It takes visitors, because if we don't have visitors, it will be the end of everything. So it's not given. It's a lot of work, but all the people who work there are so excited about it that they work a lot.
Laurent, I'm very impressed by the words said when you say it's not a given.
No, that's very true, and that's something you feel in a big place like Versailles. You realize, and you see the history also of all those people who've given so much and worked so hard to save it, because it could have been destroyed many times after the revolution, during the wars, just by forgetting to maintain it. If you don't spend the millions every year to maintain the roofs and the fountains and everything, it will be a ruin in just a few decades. So you have this feeling of fragility, even if it's huge and splendid.
Magnificent, but it's still
extremely fragile.
Another point you mentioned, I also want to echo, which is the history of both the Palaces of Versailles and also the Forbidden City, like the Palace Museum. Both went through hundreds of years, and there were enormous amount of historical events happening. Some are very dramatic. Some are devastating. So now when people go there, how to make sure this history can be reflected through a gigantic symbol like the Palaces of Versailles, like the Forbidden City. I don't know how you think about that.
It is true that those places also embody sometimes a very tragic history, because history is everything. It's
Yes.
good and bad times.
Yeah.
And with those great places of power, because that's what the Forbidden City is, or Versailles, you can feel the wars. You can feel, when you just see Napoleon appearing somewhere in Versailles, suddenly you don't realize why you're in the Queen's apartment, and then 2 rooms further, it's the crowning of Napoleon. Just that makes you realize that it's been a very complicated story.
Yeah.
Even if you don't see any trace of the revolution in Versailles, we don't show any trace of that because there's none. It's only the missing things, but you can guess that also. You have the throne room without a throne, even the carpet has disappeared, and the beds, in fact, have been recreated because it's one of the things that people during the revolution have destroyed in priority. Beds were the symbol of the monarchy and the tyranny. So you can feel the emptiness, the things missing, and sometimes you feel also that something strange has happened in this country, and you feel that when you visit the place. And same thing at the Forbidden City. And also I believe in the power of objects. I mean, when you have a real precious special object, it speaks. You just have to try to listen.
With here.
But they say so much, the objects. They're living, they have a soul, and they're very important.
The Palace of Versailles has transformed from France's seat of power to a top-notch museum. The scenes of historic halls and gardens are always reminders of France's ancient national treasures. But the performances of the Royal Opera House of Versailles, for example, like this Labor Day holiday presentation in China, is a clear picture of how the public today is fascinated with cultures of their own and beyond national borders. When the concert is being held, people from all over the city come over and pass by. They can hear the music. If they visit some of these buildings, they can see the exhibitions.
That's what we can feel of Hangzhou, even though we don't know the city very well yet. It's so open, and there's a very particular space, open, connected with nature again. The city is a very easy to live city, and the architecture, everything has open spaces, and it reminds us of Versailles with all those perspectives and open spaces. So it means that it's all conceived for meetings and discoveries and contacts. It's not closed, it's not secret, it's open to everyone.
As we speak, there are visitors inside the exhibition. They are walking around listening to all the stories related to Versailles. Having said that, though, you know how to do this. I mean, people talk about cultural exchanges, but what exactly to you is it? And how to make sure it is not going to be just skin deep?
Well, I think cultural exchange is difficult to realize. So if we do it, it probably means that it's a need. It's a pleasure, of course, but it's also a need. It's like food. It's like eating. We need it. We like it, because it feels something very deep inside us. I think if we don't discuss with someone from a different perspective, a different culture, maybe there are things we don't really feel. And in the eyes of a foreigner, you see yourself better, you see your world better. And how we work on this is by understanding each other, by using the people who've been the pioneers. I think it's all a matter of pioneers, you know, those Jesuits who were traveling in the time of Louis XIV to China, those scientists, those people who were more open-minded maybe than others, and then the rest of people
follow their steps.
And maybe it's not so natural. A certain category of people feel that excitement of discovering something different, and then they bring the others with them.
Were there some of those individuals or moments in history, for example, between the East and West, that you look into more closely? I know you are the expert on the 17th century art. I read a lot about you and also the works you've created. So tell us more about that.
Well, I'm not sure who I would choose. We have a favorite story in Versailles, which is the visit of the ambassadors of the King of Siam. And I would maybe choose that king, Fra Narai, who was a very enlightened person and sent this embassy to Versailles. It's been a very, very important moment for French culture, discovering those ambassadors with their strange hats and strange cultures and all the presents they brought. So in that time, I think the initiative, the most impressive initiative came from Asia. And then in the 18th century, I would take the example of this minister, Bertin, who was so passionate about China, a collector, a lover of Chinese science and literature and traditions, and he really brought Chinese culture into the French spirit. So you have a lot of those people, and Voltaire was so important in explaining the French how China was a great civilization.
I see that you are trying to build up this exhibition and all the programs related with the beautiful wind of the bilateral interactions at the very top level between the two presidents, so that there will be more real cultural exchanges also.
I think France and China are a very special example of bilateral relationships, and we're celebrating the 60th anniversary of the diplomatic relationships between France and the People's Republic of China. And Charles de Gaulle was a visionary, including on this aspect. And those two countries are so different and also so connected that it's very important for us, very enriching to work on our dialogues with the Chinese. We have also a project with the Forbidden City right now, and very often we feel that the Forbidden City is the only palace in the world that can be compared with Versailles. There's something very strange, a kind of equivalent in a way.
How would you describe that, what you call as strange yet exciting?
Well, I think it's strange to travel very far away and find something that looks a little bit like you, even if it's very different. The fact that it's huge and just the grandeur of it is common for the two sides. And then the way it's connected to power and administration, but also to poetry and nature and art. Those places are really very important for creation of all kinds, music, decorative arts, painting, sculpture, of course. And I think it's important to realize that very important, strange events happen the same way in two very distant places of the planet.
What a beautiful coincidence.
Absolutely, it's like a coincidence.
The Chinese president is traveling in France at the moment. So what are some of the important messages coming from the most well-known cultural institution in France to him and also the Chinese people?
Well, it's hard. It's a responsibility that you are giving me to advise the president. But I think it's maybe a way to bring all the people behind him to just love France. We need to have Chinese people loving France, and we need to have French people loving China. I mean, it's so moving when you see these connections. We have Chinese people living in Paris or elsewhere in France, the French who live in China. It's an adventure, and it's in this way that we will build the future. We need to get closer and closer. Maybe not globalized as it was in the last decades. Maybe people were a bit tired of that globalization where you felt you were at the same place anywhere, the same shops, same architecture everywhere. That's not
a simulation, globalization.
No, that's not what we need. We need to move, to discover, and each culture has to develop in their own spirit, but not alone.
Final question, what kind of message would you like to convey through your collaboration with China, through your collaboration with other countries?
Well, I like our relationships with Chinese colleagues because we feel that the scholarly approach of what we're doing is very close. In fact, it's much closer than we thought. And
in what way, when you say close?
Well, I think it's surprisingly easy when you discuss with a Chinese colleague. We had the experience with the Forbidden City. We were in front of an object, I was saying, and then suddenly it's like we are the same family when we're in front of this object. You know, sometimes we have a meeting and we're discussing. It can be a little bit complicated, but then when we move to
the real history,
look at an object, then you feel there's a community of scholars, of curators, and in front of the object it works, and it's like brother and sister. We had exactly that experience at the Forbidden City. So I think having a real matter of working together is the only thing, because you want to do your job and you do it with other people.
Cultural exchanges are not just about cherishing and appreciating each other's history, but to create and innovate for a more immersive experience today.
So French, so chic. This is the exhibition showing the French lifestyle throughout history. Look at here. This corner belongs to Louis XIV. Of course, that was the Gilded Age of French economy. And he is known as the King of Sun. Look at the tableware, the embroidery everywhere is the sun shining. And this is my favorite corner. It is known as a place resembling the Petit Trianon in Palaces of Versailles. And it's known as a corner loved by Marie Antoinette, one of the most legendary women, of course, in French history. She's the wife of Louis XVI. She loves luxurious things, new lifestyle, and working closely with the craftsmen of her generation, and brought the French lifestyle to a whole new level. And the colorful magaron, she loved it, according to history of this. Now it's time to relax a little bit in this beautiful corner in honor of Marie Antoinette. She is the last queen of the monarch before the French Revolution. And it's time to relax a little bit. It's always good to enjoy life.
I guess this is why I was really enjoying myself, also when walking along an exhibition of French life and art after the in-depth interview with director of the Palace of Versailles.